At this point, I'd like to entertain the motion that we have proposed.
Appreciate the board hereby moves to waive the confidential discussion that took place during the board's July 25th executive session with Attorney Thomas Committee. Specifically, the board waiver is limited to the portion of the meeting in which Ms. Ford stated she communicated with a family who had or had pending legal claims against the Tolland Board of Education. Yeah.
Any discussion on this?
I just like to say, you are giving yourself permission to break the confidentiality of executive session. Once you vote to remove confidentiality from executive session, no one can ever trust this type of meeting again. I ask the board to think about what authority is it that you have to waive executive session without prior warning. I called the FOIA commission, and although this is not illegal, he advised against it. This sets a very menacing precedent. It will have a chilling effect on anyone who asks to speak in executive session. So I request a roll call vote on this motion. Because the chair is cherry picking what she wants revealed from this particular executive session, I urge every employee in Tolland Public Schools, every parent, and anyone asked to speak in our session to pay attention to who votes yes, because they are exhibiting the power they truly have over your truth.
Any other questions?
Yeah, and I'm concerned with a couple. One, as Fleur said here, I think we're on slippery slope. Sorry. I think we're on slippery slope when we start waiving the confidentiality of executive session. But it's more concerning to me the picking of which box. And and in reading through here, if we're looking at just the part where these sentences were described, what's to say that there aren't other parts in there that are, I mean, how are we choosing just this, and why is that okay?
Anyone else at this time? I see Bergen has your hand up. Bergen, if you could please unmute yourself.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Hello? Hello? Can anybody hear me?
Bergen, we can't hear you if you're trying to speak.
All right, I'm unmuted, but I don't know why it's not, you can't hear me.
Personally, online meeting. Everybody's muted now. Can you, once you unmute it now, you should be able to speak.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can anybody hear me? Oh,
Yes,
thank you.
We can hear you.
I'm seeing the replies from people in the room that can hear me on Zoom. So all I'm going to say, I don't know if the board can hear me or if somebody can maybe. Can the people on Zoom still hear me?
Yeah,
we can hear you on Zoom, yeah.
I'm going to ask you, Bergen, if you could please put your statement into the chat and then we can read it out loud. So
Can somebody tell the chair that I am driving and I cannot chat right now? But if somebody could just say this to the chair, that if we're going to open this executive session from June 25th, July 25th, then I would like all events leading up to this meeting to be made public so that everybody in the public knows exactly what happened leading up to this meeting. If there's anybody who hears that can possibly share that, that would be great.
she's driving.
But she certainly can stay in that mode for the duration because she's a board member. So if you want to speak now, you could take the duration.
If anybody else can also hear me, I am 2 minutes out from the high school. So if we can somehow pause
Any other members have anything at this point? We will wait for.
Charlie, I would,
Hey, you're not muted and we can't hear you, but if anyone can, if you want to be on speaker, I'll be on. Okay, she's pulling in right now.
So you can assume.
I can barely even hear what they're saying in the room to begin with.
agree that even though we technically can do this, I do want to sets a bad precedent. And I also would just like to make a comment. I think this motion is a little odd. It's gonna be basically when we're going, you're dealing with executive session. I think that's a little odd. Motion.
Okay. So we'll wait for, this record to come.
Based on my knowledge, executive session privilege is not there to protect board members. So I see no issue with us. Opening for executive session.
I think it's fair that if she's just pulled in, it should be very, I don't think it's certain ways, but she has an opportunity to hear.
Last week. Okay, sorry. I don't know if you guys know it, but you cannot hear anything on Zoom. Nothing. So I apologize. Said before, I raised phones to try to get here. But if we're going to waive the public in this executive session on July 25th, then I would like every event leading up to this executive session on August 18th to be made available, so everybody in the public knows exactly what is going on. I'll have the session.
And if we are doing this time, we will do a roll call. And then we can say, I will agree, and if you don't, or you can abstain, we'll start over here. Perfect.
Hello, you guys, we can't hear you.
Can't hear
Speak up. You don't have microphones, so just speak up, please.
Nay.
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 Aye.
I,
Therefore, this passes with majority, and therefore we now dispose of that information. So that's clear.
Ms. Griffin said that we can now go, so I don't know if there's something we can address.
How closer?
Can we slide it closer, maybe, I don't know. Nobody can hear me.
We're in the room and we can't hear you.
Yeah, I don't want to break it.
Yeah,
We'll break it.
there's a lot of wires.
Yeah. Is it possible to move it this way?
Sorry, what are you asking?
Is it possible to move it this, closer to the
Everyone online in the Zoom room hear us now? If you could give a thumbs up, okay, that problem solved, thank you. Okay. We are on to agenda item, the second one. So, number one, we are here this evening to consider the possible censure of a board member, Ms. Christina Ford. Robert's rules of order provide that organizations may discipline their members through censure without formal disciplinary procedure. Board policy 9160 provides that the Robert's rules of order shall govern the proceedings of the board except as otherwise provided by the bylaws. On or about September 6th, 2021, and on or about September 13th, 2021, individuals from the same family filed legal claims against the school district. While the September 6th claim was dismissed by the relevant agency, the September 13th claim is still pending. On June 22nd, 2022, the board held a regular meeting. During public comment, one individual from said family stated, "I know what happened behind closed doors because some of you have reached out to me." And the lawyer jumping up and down saying, "Hey, you're going to take this all the way to the Supreme Court." During an executive session of a special meeting of the Tolland Board of Education held on July 25th, 2022, Ms. Ford admitted to all board members present that she had communicated with said family with whom had pending claims against the district. The question for the board is whether Ms. Ford's admitted conduct was an unauthorized disclosure of a matter discussed in executive session, compromised the board and the administration, and or was a conflict of interest between the board's member duty of loyalty to the board and possible violation of board bylaw 9200, including the following provisions. Number 15, respect the confidentiality of information that is privileged under applicable law and refrain from unauthorized disclosure of matters discussed in executive session. Number 19, take no private action that will compromise the board and the administration. Number 20, refrain from using the board position for personal or partisan gain and avoid any conflict of interest or the appearance of impropriety. If the board determines that such conduct violates the aforementioned policies of the board, the next question for the board is to consider is whether such act merits the censure of Ms. Ford. Prior to any discussion and or possible action, Ms. Ford shall have an opportunity, should she so desire, to respond to the limited question of whether her admitted conduct violated board policy of 9200. At this time, we are given.
Come up. Thank you, Madam Chair. You have something to say? Fellow members of the Tolland Board of Education. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, keep talking out loud.
I am presenting this as my statement addressing the motion to censure brought forward as part of this meeting. While I am dismayed the chair has decided to move forward with this action without providing copies of her correspondence surrounding its origins and providing inaccurate information to our legal counsel, that was to be expected. I asked for the circumstances of her conversations August 3rd and documents were provided for viewing in person only at the BOE office while I was at work today. I feel this is just one more part of a concerted effort to quiet me and dissuade me from continuing to seek the truth in all matters brought before the board. Over the past several weeks, there has been information disseminated to the chair and board members by our board attorney directly addressing the motion at hand, which I have asked the chair to disclose or allow me to address. But I have not heard from the chair and board attorney permitting me to discuss these issues, so I'm left feeling with unfounded allegations, yet unable to appropriately address them. This is unfair and unfortunate, and yet another example of how this is not about restoring faith in the board, but punishing a member. I do not deny that I met with a former student related to her complaint filed against the Tolland School District. Her mother was there for support and to protect her daughter. I was there to listen only. I met with this young woman to find out what her complaints and concerns are in order to see what the issue is and hopefully address or avoid hopefully address or avoid them from occurring with other students. But that is where it ended. I did not share any information that could be considered privileged or undertake any other actions that could violate my responsibilities as a member of the Board of Education. The young woman's complaint was dismissed in early January. I did not meet with anyone that had pending litigation against the school district. The statement that I spoke to a family/others with pending litigation is an inaccurate statement. As members of the Board of Education, I thought that was our responsibility, to listen to our families and put our students' educational welfare first and foremost. It is my understanding the chair specifically alleging the following violations as a specific basis for her motion to censure, and that my actions created a conflict of interest and breached my duty of loyalty to the board from policy 9200. I will remind all of you that 9200 is a policy we developed a couple years ago. It is not statute, it's a civility code. I didn't break the law. Respect the confidentiality of information that is privileged under applicable law and refrain from unauthorized disclosure of matters discussed in executive session. That's number 15 of the civility code. Again, while I freely admit that I had conversations with a young woman who filed a complaint against the school district, I deny any discussion of privileged matters discussed in executive session and challenge anyone to present substantiated evidence that such disclosure occurred. In the June 22nd minutes, the constituent mentions that board members, and I'll emphasize plural, reached out to her. The statement is presented on the recording of the meeting that was left out of the minutes. Some of you have reached out to. Not one of you, but some of you, which alludes to more than one board member reaching out. There is nothing in the June 22nd minutes or on the video of the meeting that prove I broke confidentiality. There is no time frame mentioned, nor what I said. I find it hypocritical of the board to believe this family when they want to blame me, but not the name of the superintendent. This seems to be at the heart of this motion to censure. To the contrary, if presented as part of a hearing which I requested, I feel I could present statements from the family that no such discussions occurred. Serious breach where other members of the board made contact with the family, but were not upfront and honest enough to say so. I renew my request for a full inquiry and hearing to be conducted on this issue. If the true intent of the chair and the board in presenting this motion to censure is to restore confidence in the board must examine this issue fully and determine if anyone else was involved in these alleged actions prior to any motion. It seems odd that while the statement says some, the board is choosing only to focus on one. Without further inquiry. Number 19, take no private action that will compromise the board and administration. As previously stated, there were no actions that were undertaken that would compromise the board and the administration, nor my loyalty to the board, and no evidence to support the claim. The complaint filed at the core of this issue was dismissed. I failed to see how my discussion with a young woman who had no pending litigation against the district regarding her experience compromised the board or administration or impaired my loyalty to the board. These assertions are dreamed up allegations with no substance other than the fact that I admit I spoke to a girl and her mother. I thought that was part of our responsibilities. Number 20, refrain from using the board position for personal or partisan gain and avoid conflict of interest or the appearance of impropriety. So anyone could claim to see what is the impropriety, what is the gain. If anything, this has caused more stress and undue anxiety for listening to one of our former students concern. It is my feeling that this action is the result of me daring to question the chair and superintendent on some of the spending in our district. Point of order, it's not about the meeting. The motion to censure is just a method of targeting me for daring to ask hard questions, case in point, and demanding answers that to date have still not been sufficiently addressed. My request to the board is if we are going to look at policy 9200, we should look at all provisions, including ensuring that all sides have a fair opportunity to present their respective positions, listen respectfully to those who communicate with the board, seeking to understand their views while recognizing my responsibility to represent the interests of the entire community. And most importantly, remember always that the first and greatest concern must be the educational welfare of the students attending the Tolland Public Schools. If the members move forward with this motion and decide to censure me, I feel we as a board have failed in our obligations to our town and our students. You have placed politics and personal animosity above doing what is right for our students. I will continue to push forward on addressing any issues I feel need to be addressed and will not be cowed by this action. I proudly represent our town and will continue to strive to put the mental and educational welfare of our students first. I simply listened to a young woman who felt bullied and ostracized by adults who are supposed to care about our students' mental health. I ask that you put your anger aside, your assumptions aside, your dislike for me aside, your political cheering squads aside, your caucus discussions aside, and just imagine it was your child that I listened to. If you were a former student, imagine it was you asking for just one person to care. If you move forward with this motion to censure, I will wear it as a badge of honor. Thank you.
I will.
Sophia Shane, the Tolland Board of Education is committed to performing its statutory responsibilities in a professional and civil manner, treating staff, students, and residents in a respectful manner. In order to ensure professionalism and responsibility, the board has adopted bylaws and policies to govern its actions and provide guidance as to appropriate behavior for individual board members. We find that board member Christina Ford has violated policy 9200 and in doing so has acted in a manner that is not in keeping with the expectation and responsibilities of a member of the Tolland Board of Education. Such actions compromise the board and the administration and gave rise to a conflict of interest and of board policy 9200. Accordingly, we vote to formally disapprove of Ms. Ford's actions and censure her for the actions and conduct described here.
Danielle, can I second? Okay, at this time, for discussion, any board members like to speak? Okay.
I want to express my absolute disgust that the executive sessions have come to this. Instead of holding regular meetings in July about our students and making sure they have what they need to start off the new school year, our chair canceled those and added meetings like this just to focus on this witch hunt. I wish I had the courage that Ms. Fleur did to ask the questions, gather information, and listen to a student and her mother who were clearly distraught. To find out the real story, the whole story. I wasn't aware of most of this. Like many of you, I was kept in the dark about a lot of these details that the superintendent, the board chair, and our attorney should have told us, but they didn't tell us this. It was all about winning a case. I'm embarrassed as a board member that we are now publicly chastising a fellow board member for putting a student's social and emotional well-being first. We failed her. And now it seems like we are trying to justify our decisions and our actions by placing some unfounded blame for one member when the real issue is the lack of leadership on this board. And if we are going to go forward with this, then I would also like to open up at some point the June 9th, 2021 executive session, which also violated policy 9200. We are setting a precedent, and if this is the way we are going to go and censuring is going to be this new thing, then I would like that executive session opened up, which was a discussion concerning an attorney-client communication related to the board's legal roles and responsibilities. I'm sure many of you who were there for that executive session know exactly what I am referring to. Thank you.
Any other board members on this part?
Yeah, let me speak up. Let me start by saying, you know, as a policy subcommittee chair, I'm pleased that the references to the, you know, the quoting of the policy. But there's as many of you know, 9200, that's 22 points. And what the three that we've referenced certainly seem apropos. I'd like to point out just a couple more in there. Number 7, saying arrive at conclusions only after discussing all aspects of the issue at hand with my fellow board members in a public meeting. All aspects. Number 16, model stability to students, employees, and all elements of the community by encouraging the free expression of opinion by all board members and engaging in respectful dialogue with fellow board members on matters being considered by the board. Again, the free expression of opinion by all board members. And then lastly, 22, the last one in there, that says, remember always that the first and greatest concern must be the educational welfare of the students attending the Tolland Public Schools. And that's really the kicker right there. The first and greatest concern must be the educational welfare. Now, referencing that back to the matter at hand, and with the portion of the executive session that we brought to light. That I see where it says that Ms. Ford admitted, what she did here, talking to the young lady. She also says in there that she didn't say anything that came from executive session. That it was simply a listening, that she was simply trying to connect with this student, which, according to my read of these aspects of 9200, is perfectly well within. My concern here is whether we like what she said, whether we like the fact that she went and said it. The civility policy tells us to respect the free expression of the opinion by all board members. Again, I don't see how we censor her for that without censoring each and every one of us for something that we may have said, something that we may have thought, something that we may have emailed, that while it doesn't violate the exact verbiage, doesn't make each and every one of us happy.
Thank you. So there's two questions here. Question one, whether this board's actions are what was alleged up in this document. And the second question is whether it amounts to something that is so bad that it deserves censorship. So on point one, and I've told Ms. Ford this, I don't believe that talking to people that we have any sort of legal business with, and I don't agree with that decision. However, there's two levels. There's what she admitted to saying, and then there's this more serious charge, far more serious charge of disclosing privileged information. And at this point, given what was set up in the minutes up at that meeting I attended and remember, they did mention multiple board members had spoken at that meeting. And I don't think that I have enough evidence to feel comfortable making that more serious charge and agreeing with that. And that's a serious issue for me, even though this may not be a trial. I think that it is a serious enough issue where I need to have a higher burden of proof before I can come to any sort of conclusion up at that level. And the reason for that goes right up into the second point, which is this is the very first time I've ever had to deal with a censure vote up on the board. Hopefully will be the last. It's a very serious procedure and it's perceived in a very serious way in the town. And I believe that if we're going about it in a way where we're not doing our complete due diligence with regards to investigating the matter thoroughly, we're in danger of politicizing the process and deepening the distrust between board members and between the board up in the town, which is a very serious issue for me. I know Ms. Lundgren, the chair, talked about wanting us to heal as board, and I absolutely agree, and I don't feel that this measure is conducive to that at all. Thank you.
Anything else at this time?
I would like to express my disappointment and sadness that this is the topic of tonight's meeting. When we were elected as Board of Education members, we took an oath and made it our duty to best serve the students and school system of our town. Matters discussed in executive session are confidential, and matters discussed in executive session with an attorney representing the board are privileged. The very reason this confidential privilege exists is to protect the district. Directly contacting individuals our attorney advised us not to is reckless dangerous, and untrustworthy. We were specifically told not to contact those people. We were told that by our attorney, the board's attorney. Breaching this confidentiality has the potential to place our district in jeopardy, which is the opposite of what we as board members are set out to do. We are ethically tasked to take no private action that would compromise the board or the administration. This was a flagrant disregard of our legal advice and a complete disregard of the district's welfare. I dislike having to vote in favor of anyone's censure, but we cannot set a precedent condoning this behavior. The violation of confidentiality of an executive session and acting contrary to the legal advice provided to the district may have exposed the district to potential financial loss and has eroded the trust and collegiality among board members. Although difficult, the censure process is being done democratically. And in a democratic society, the majority rules. There's dialogue and debate, and then a vote. And the vote determines the outcome and direction. If Ms. Ford is censured tonight by a majority of vote, the board as a whole should accept that and move on from that vote. Those who can't accept the majority vote and who are unable to shift their thinking and continue as productive board members will undermine this democratic process. I'm hoping we as a board send a message that we will protect our district. We will hold ourselves to a special standard as elected officials, and we are accountable to one another and to our district.
First, I would just like to say that I'm disappointed at the general statements about regarding animosity or anger, because I have shown none of that. I've treated every one of my board colleagues with professionalism, respect, and politeness, both in public and in private. As for censure, I believe our role as Board of Education members is to represent our entire district, which includes all of our students and staff, not just one individual or family. We cannot do that and involve ourselves personally in the investigation process in any way. We hire attorneys with public funds to do the job they are trained to do. It is our role to follow the legal advice they provide us during that process. Compromising an ongoing investigation breaks board trust, and it impairs our neutrality. It is also insensitive and disrespectful to our staff to become involved and form opinions on matters that we have limited information on as the process unfolds. Unfortunately, although the most egregious, this is not the first time we have had to address how actions such as this compromise the board. It's unfortunate and embarrassing that we have to have this discussion, but ultimately we need to ensure that actions such as these do not continue moving forward.
First things first, I want to express what we have a sense of urgency, to express how we feel. We all have a duty to respect the oath we took, and that, to me, that's the bottom. That's where it's at. The duty that's owed to kids, staff, some of whom might be on that call right now, if not here in person, and families inside, including those in person, those on the Zoom, and those not present. 10 months ago, when I first started on this board, I would have never imagined we'd have so many executive sessions, confidential discussions. Admittedly, I did not know the situation we were in and are still in. However, I see it sort of as this. Very certain. We have rules. Children have rules in school and at home. Businesses and employers have rules for their employees. In fact, our teachers have rules that we have to sort of make sure they follow. Superintendent has. And all of them would be held accountable if they're asked. Every single one. However, one of us broke our rules and won't simply apologize to the school district and its family and staff. What makes it any of us any different? What makes us more of a lawyer than the million lawyers we've spoken to? And what changes our goals? I just continue to look at the surface level because I've always believed that you should never quit if someone's voting. I will never quit. Not one day in my life. But what I will do, however, is question the intent behind these actions. What was to be accomplished, what was the goal, and what was the mission? What stuns me is we would probably still not be aware of this had that family not spoken up in public participation. That's scary. True. I trust very little, all while I trust way too much. And I won't be playing that balancing game, especially as a board member. As of today, August 18, 2022, I cannot trust this board as a whole, as a unit, particularly the individual or individuals proven to breach confidentiality. But how do any of us know that this member was alone in breach of confidentiality? What scared me most. After all, in public participation, that's when we found out there wasn't. So how embarrassing this is for the staff. Hopefully students don't recognize the potential impact that could have had and could still have. And instead, hopefully they remain focused on school and advancing themselves to the next level of education and life. And hopefully families aren't turned off by this and trust that the board can eventually get back to a place where we once again trust every board member.
First and foremost, I'd like to make it very clear that one person's words and actions have brought us here tonight, and one person only. The blatant disregard for the rules that were put in place to protect our community has brought us here. If anyone thinks that I want to be here on a Thursday night talking about this instead of focusing on board progress or being home with my family, you are wrong. This is not a witch hunt. This is not bullying. This is not attack. This is not personal opinion. This is the Board of Education following the proper code of conduct, following the legal directive, and addressing the rules that were broken by our teammates. Her unilateral decision to disclose information from an executive session to the affected members of our community made this privileged communication public. This not only cost Tolland taxpayers money in legal, but to put the community in jeopardy and derail the hard work of the Board of Education. Our primary charge is to continue to be supporting our school, our students, our staff, and protecting our school staff. Our entire schools, all of us. The situation that we find ourselves in does exactly the opposite. It undermines the work that we've been set to do. The focus has been put on a member who fails to follow the rules, code of conduct, and code of ethics. Instead, that member chooses to make their own rules and misleads the public by stating that it's her advocacy. We can all remain steadfast advocates for the entire community in an ethical and moral way. In order to be transparent, all work should be done in our boardrooms and in committee meetings. The situation that we find ourselves in is simple. We had an executive session. We had multiple executive session meetings with multiple attorneys present. They reviewed the details, reminded us of our legal rules, and that confidentiality was paramount and required. I took that advice to heart, and I followed their guidance. She ignored that directive. She admitted to breaking the rules of executive session, and said she would do it again, and that she was not sorry that she met with family and students. This behavior weakens the board, erodes the trust in the board, and removes the confidentiality of executive session. This type of behavior did not advocate for the students and staff of Tolland Public Schools, but it put the school system in a compromised position. It is my hope that we can move forward from all of this, be honest, be trustworthy, and be transparent. Our focus needs to be on the students and staff of the Tolland Public School. It is time for us to roll up our sleeves and get back to the basics and do the work that we were elected to do as Board of Education members. Holding each other accountable to the code of ethics prescribed to us by legislation is paramount to our future success. I look forward to getting back into the boardroom to truly focus on the future of our schools and our community.
As leaders in this community, we need to do what's right. We were elected to do a job. It might be a volunteer position, but it's important to understand the impact that it has to our board and our community. There is a personal responsibility by taking the oath of office to abide by policy. We must respect that there are protocols in place and do our best to follow the professional way of conducting business in order to keep our district safe. When the board attorney or attorneys in this case provide legal advice, it is our job to listen to them. This is not the place to conduct your own side investigation. The actions that this board has taken as a board member are what brings us here today. Transparency is often spoken about, as is accountability. This situation is one that the whole district needs to be made aware of. These actions are a clear violation of policy and it compromises the district and board's integrity. We as an entity can no longer conduct board business as usual since the trust has been breached. There needs to be accountability for misconduct. This isn't the first time behaviors like this have been questioned. There are consequences to action. We as a board need to move forward. With that said, I believe that we've spent enough time and resources on this topic. So out of respect for our community, I'm going to end the discussion and we will do a roll call vote. Again, all those in favor, say aye. Any opposed, say nay, or you can abstain from the vote. So we will do a roll call vote. Right.
Absolutely nay.
Jacob?
Nay.
Nay.
Christina Ford, nay.
Jaden Register, aye.
Sophia Schick, aye.
Stephen Hilton, aye.
Danielle, aye.
And on an aye as well, therefore the motion to censure does pass. And at this time, I will entertain a motion for adjournment. Stephen Hilton, so moved.
Jaden Register, I will second that motion.
Therefore, we will put that at 7:17.